Here's why you should be careful opening the door even to your family members. A 12-year-old girl was living alone with her single dad. They had a great relationship, but she would often stay home alone when her dad was working. One day, he warned her that his workday will be longer than usual and that he will be home very late. That day, the girl tried staying awake to wait for him, but in the end, she ended up falling asleep alone. And she had a very strange dream. In that dream, her and her dad were standing on the opposite sides of a really big highway, and she could see him trying to yell something to her. Very faintly, she could make out his words. He was saying, "Don't open the door." When suddenly, the girl woke up from someone ringing the doorbell. She jumped off the bed, ran to the door, and looked through the peephole. She saw her dad's face there, staring directly at her. And she was just about to open the door when she remembered her dream. Plus, her dad's face outside looked a little bit weird. She stepped away for a second when the doorbell rang again. "Dad?" she asked. The doorbell rang again. "Dad, answer me." The doorbell rang again. "Is there someone else with you?" The doorbell rang again. "Dad, why are you not answering?" The girl was on the verge of tears when the doorbell rang again. "I'm not gonna open the door until you say something," the girl screamed and ran away from the door. The doorbell kept ringing, but the dad stayed silent. This continued for around an hour when the girl finally fell asleep on the floor of her bedroom. In the morning, she woke up and realized that the doorbell was no longer ringing. So she tiptoed to the front door and looked through the peephole. Her dad was still standing there, looking directly at her. She very carefully opened the door and screamed. Her father's cut-off head was nailed to the door right at the level of the peephole, and there was a note taped to the ringer of the doorbell saying only 2 words: "Smart girl." Listen to me carefully. If you find a Polaroid on the ground, do not pick it up. And here's why. Not too long ago, this high schooler found a Polaroid laying on the ground next to his school. And on it was a picture of a beautiful girl wearing a red dress and holding a peace sign with one of her hands. He immediately fell in love with her and wanted to find out who this girl was, so he took the picture home with him and put it next to his bed on his nightstand. That night, he got woken up by someone or something scratching at his window. After he got up, he could hear a faint laugh coming from the street. So he ran outside to see who it was. Maybe it was the girl from the picture. But when he got out, the laugh seemed to be moving further and further away, so he started to chase it. The boy didn't realize how far he ran. He felt like he was in a trance. Before he knew it, he found himself in the middle of a really busy street and ended up getting hit by a car going at a really high speed. The driver who hit him tried to resuscitate the boy, but it was already too late. But he did notice a Polaroid picture laying next to his car. The picture was of a beautiful girl wearing a red dress and holding up 3 fingers. If this show pops up on your page, do not watch it. This show is called Shadow, and it's been reported to appear on different platforms despite the fact that it never actually aired. The first recorded story of a man watching the show is gonna make you feel pretty uneasy. One afternoon, John was relaxing at home and looking for a new, fun show to watch. That's when he found Shadow. The cover got his attention, so he started watching the show and got completely drawn in. The show was funny, it was relatable, and had the perfect balance of suspense and romance. And at many points, John felt like the show was about his life. So naturally, he fell in love with the show and started talking to his friends about it. You know, asking them if they have watched the show, and if they haven't, they have to watch the show. However, none of his friends were actually able to find the show on any streaming platform, which in the beginning, they just kind of brushed off. But the more John talked about the show, the more curious they got. After doing a Google search, none of them could actually find any information on Shadow. And as the time went on, John started noticing weird things happening in the show. The characters started breaking the 4th wall and talking directly to the camera, which John assumed was just a fun director's choice. But the more he listened to what they were saying, the creepier it got. Their phrases very oddly seemed to be geared towards John. Like the characters in the show that they were referring to would have the same names as John's family members and friends. The situations and the conflicts in the show were very similar, if not identical, to the things that John's been through in the past. At some point during his watch session, John got a text on his phone, so he picked up his phone to respond. The second his eyes left the screen, the dialogue in the show stopped. When he finished typing the text and put his phone down, he briefly noticed one of the characters looking directly at him. second they made eye contact, the character went back to the scene and continued their unfinished dialogue. And the same thing would happen anytime that John would leave the room. The characters would stop whatever they were doing even though the show was not technically paused. One time, John got up to get a snack from the pantry and the same thing happened. Characters stopped whatever they were doing in the scene, but John heard this one sentence while he was still in the kitchen. One of the characters casually said, "He's taking longer than usual." But the second that John got back in the living room, the show continued like nothing happened. The closer he got to the end of the season, the more recent the events would be in relation to his life. John was still really determined to show this show to his friends. But since none of them had the show on any streaming platform, John invited one of his best friends over so that they could watch the show together. However, when he clicked play, the show wouldn't load. They tried restarting the TV and reloading the website, but nothing seemed to work. When the friend left, John tried playing the show again, and what do you know? This time it worked. So for whatever reason, John could only watch the show alone. And as time went on, the things in the show got weirder and weirder. Whenever John would move around the room, the cast members would glance at him as if they were aware of what's going on. At that point, John was too freaked out to continue watching the show, so he stopped. He was not gonna finish it. He turned off the TV and he went to sleep. But that night, the TV turned on by itself and the show started playing. And this happened every night going forward. At 4 a.m., the TV would turn on and start playing Shadow Shadow. John even unplugged the TV, but the show was still playing. John was beyond terrified at this point because the last episode of the season was of the main character discovering a show that they really like. And to add fire to the flame, the setting of that episode was identical to John's living room. So John pulls out his phone to record the screen of the TV to have proof. But the second he clicks the record button, the TV turns off. The following night, John woke up at 4 a.m. and noticed that the show wasn't playing like it was in the past. So with relief, John got up to go to the kitchen and get some water. But before he was able to turn on the lights, he saw the entire cast of the show sitting in his living room staring directly at him. And no one has heard from John since that night. It was like he vanished from the face of the earth. Obviously, his family contacted the police, but they had no intel on John's whereabouts. His friend had a spare key to John's apartment, so he went there alone to investigate. The apartment was empty, John was gone, but all his things were still there. His bed was unmade, all the lights were off, nothing seemed too out of ordinary except the TV screen was broken and there was a full cup of water standing on the stand next to it. And the best friend was shocked when he got home because Shadow Shadow was in his recommended playlist on the TV. Now this is the same friend who John invited over before to show Shadow Shadow too. So he knew what the cover of the show looked like, but the one on his TV was different. There was an extra character that looked freakishly similar to John. But the friend was smart, so instead of watching the show, he decided to do a deep dive. A quick Google search got him no results. It took him hours until he finally found information about the show on the dark web. Apparently, during the filming process, a huge accident happened, killing the whole cast and crew in the most gruesome way. Obviously, the production stopped and the show was cancelled. The filming company in charge of the show paid a lot of money to keep this information hidden, to not ruin its reputation. Now there's theories about whose TV the show will appear on next. Some say that you must know the previous victim. Some say that it only targets people working in the film industry. However, the general consensus is that all you need to know to see the show on your platform is to know its name. Have you heard the story about the cursed nursery rhyme? If not, sit down, get comfy, and maybe turn your lights on because this one is kind of creepy. So there was this young boy who was known to bully the kids in his class, and he often got in trouble for it. He would pull the girls' hair, start fights with the guys, and lie to the teachers. There was one girl in his class though that he bullied the most. And to be honest, not a lot of people liked her either. People were kind of scared of her. She had messy black hair, black eyes, and would often come to school in dirty or ripped clothing. And this boy would always make fun of her for it, and since she had no other friends in the school, no one would ever come to her defense. There were even rumors that the girl was either an orphan or homeless because every day she would get dropped off at school by an old crooked lady with eyes blacker than the girls. The boy would start even more rumors about her family. He would put gum in her hair and even cut her clothes with scissors. Finally, his parents got called to the principal when he tripped the girl in the hallway and she got a nosebleed from the fall. But the principal visit did not change his behavior. If anything, it only got worse. One day, he even pushed the girl right in front of the old lady that usually drops her off. And when the lady started yelling at him, he just laughed, knowing that the lady is too old to catch up with him if he runs away. So the old lady just looked at him and said, "You just wait, your punishment will come soon." And what do you know, that night, the boy had a nightmare. In that nightmare, him and a few other children were tied up laying on a floor of a dark room. The boy was terrified, but he couldn't identify the threat. As he looked around the room, he saw a big wooden table covered in red and black paint. And behind the table, he could make out a fire and smoke, as well as a metal pipe going straight to the ceiling. And it didn't take him long to figure out what the fire could be for, and what the red paint on the table actually was. And throughout the entire dream, he could hear heavy, raspy breathing, but he couldn't see where it was coming from. So that dream was obviously terrifying, but after the boy woke up, he quickly forgot about it and just went on with his day. However, the next night, the boy found himself in the same exact nightmare. And for that entire day, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The following night, he just kept twisting and turning, and he was too scared to fall asleep. And when he finally managed to fall asleep, his fear only escalated because he finally saw where that heavy breathing was coming from. He saw a creature resembling the old crooked lady with black eyes. Only in his dream, she was much bigger with one of her eyes sewn shut. She was covered in ripped black fabric, and any exposed skin was covered with hives. The lady looked at the children with her one black eye and started singing. 7 days in just 1 week, till you end up in a creek. Sweaty palms and bloody nose, till you end up decomposed. When the boy woke up, he quickly got dressed and ran to school. He knew exactly who he needed to talk to save him. He was planning to apologize and plead the old lady for mercy. He waited in front of the school for roughly 3 hours, and the girl did not show up, meaning that the old lady wouldn't be showing up either. And the next night, he had the same dream. And the creature continued singing. Seek no truth, your eyes are shut, till I make another cut. Limb by limb, I'll take it all. You will be my next new doll. The whole next day, the boy tried to find out where the girl and the lady lived. But when he asked his classmates, they just looked at him really confused. They have never met a girl with that description. Even the teachers denied ever seeing a student with those looks. Both his parents and the principal had no recollection of ever meeting for his bullying issues with a girl. When he told his family about his reoccurring nightmare, they just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said that it's just a dream and it will end eventually. The following night, the boy laid in his bed with his eyes wide open. He refused to go to sleep. But even with his eyes open, he could hear the singing. I'm so glad you took the bait. You have sealed your own fate. Fire burns and so will you. Land down under waits for you. As the sun began to rise, the singing quieted down. The boy could barely get off his bed. He really wanted to go to sleep, but he had to find that girl first. His plan was to ask everyone in school until someone remembers her, and if they don't, he was gonna search the entire town until he found her. The boy's parents left for work early that day and didn't see how he fell asleep sitting on his bed. It wasn't until the end of the day that they found him lifeless, holding his phone in his hand with an ongoing voice recording. After playing it back, they could hear a faint singing. Fire burns and so will you. Land down under waits for you. Final straw will be your breath. You have now met your death.